My daughter-in-law slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "This seat belongs to my father! Get out!" The laughter stopped. Forks froze mid-air. I felt my knees buckle as I hit the floor, surrounded by the family I once built from love. But I didn't cry. I picked up the place card with my name scratched out and quietly slipped it into my purse. That single piece of paper would become the start of everything that followed. They thought it was humiliation. I knew it was evidence. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more stories like this reach those who need to hear them. It was Christmas Eve in the woodlands, and the air smelled like cedar, cinnamon, and something rehearsed. I parked beneath the garland lights wrapping the porch and carried two things that still meant something to me: a basket of homemade preserves and a vintage Bordeaux my late husband once saved for special nights. The door opened before I could knock. Darlie stood there in her satin red dress, the smile wide but her eyes already editing the moment. "Arliss, so glad you could make it," she said, voice pitched for the guests behind her, not for me. I stepped inside. The rooms looked like a magazine spread. White candles, gold ribbon, and even the dog had a plaid bow tie. Duran brushed my shoulder in a distracted half-hug, already glancing toward his phone. I told myself to breathe. At 68, I had learned the difference between being welcomed and being managed. The dining room shimmered. Every plate gleamed. That's when I saw it, the place card at the end of the table. Mrs. Guest, not Mom, not even Arliss, just Mrs. Guest. Next to it, another card in gold script, Guest of Honor, Rafael Mendez, Darlie's father. I felt the floor tilt beneath my shoes, but my face stayed still. I picked up my card and smoothed its edges. It wasn't paper, it was strategy. No one noticed me standing there. Or maybe they did. Rafael cleared his throat and gestured for me to sit. I smiled back politely. "I'll wait until everyone's seated," I said. My tone sounded calm even to me. Dinner unfolded like choreography. Darlie directed where the candles went, how the napkins folded, which Carol played next. Joran kept glancing at her for approval, nodding at cues. When I tried to help with the dishes, Darlie waved her manicured hand. "Oh no, Mom, just float with the kids. Okay? They love having you at their table." The kids' table. I looked at Hallie and Kieran setting up near the fireplace, laughing softly. Maybe that was where I belonged tonight, in laughter, not in ceremony. Still, something inside me began to steady, the kind of stillness that comes before a measured step. Later, in the butler's pantry, while setting the preserves down, I noticed a crumpled stack of papers by the printer. They were draft copies of the evening's Thank You program. Across one page, written in red ink, "Cut this. Thank you, Mom, for building our table." The final version sat neatly printed beside it, my name gone. My hands didn't shake as I folded that draft and slipped it into my purse. Paper could wound, but it could also testify. Hallie peeked into the pantry. "Grandma, are you going to sit in your chair like last year?" she asked. Her voice was small, uncertain. I smiled gently. "I'll sit where respect sits. Sweetheart." Kieran caught sight of the Mrs. Guest card still in my hand. His brows furrowed. He said nothing, but his silence felt like an ally's nod. As laughter swelled from the dining room, I typed a note to myself on my phone. Card, Mrs. or Guest, draft cut, thank you, Mom. My fingers moved steady, not bitter. Observe, collect, answer with order, not volume. That was my rule. Back at the table, Raphael's engraved nameplate gleamed under candlelight. My own card sat like a typo that no one dared to fix. I aligned my knife perfectly parallel to the fork, a ritual of precision, a way to claim control where manners had replaced meaning. Darlie raised her glass. "To family," she said. I smiled back. To truth, I whispered. Outside, the wind brushed the windows, making the lights sway, tiny halos trembling against glass. Somewhere deep down, I knew this evening wasn't an ending. It was documentation. The dining room shimmered with candlelight and silver. Darlie stood at the head of the table, glass raised, her red dress catching every reflection like a warning light. To family, she began, her smile wide enough for the camera someone had set up near the mantel. To those who supported our move, our growth, and our blessings this year. Her voice carried easily over the clink of forks and quiet laughter. My name was not spoken. I lifted my glass anyway, smiling at no one in particular. Years of practice had trained me to fill silences with grace. The wine was dry, a little bitter, perfectly fitting. Joran gave a small nod across the table, the kind that said, "Just go along." I noticed his napkin folded with precision, as if order could mask avoidance. The ceiling fan hummed, the Christmas lights blinked, a rhythm only I seemed to hear, steady, polite, pretending everything was fine. Darlie moved to her father's side, fixing his lapel. "You always look so handsome in navy. Daddy?" He chuckled softly, his accent thick, old world. He had the seat where I'd been placed last year. My card sat further down, closer to the children, labeled neatly in gold, Mrs. Guest. When Darlie's father stepped into the dining room to take his seat, she motioned toward the end of the table, toward my chair. "This one belongs to my father," she said brightly, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Oh, I didn't realize," I replied, starting to rise. Her hand didn't lift. Instead, she pressed harder. "You heard me. Move." It wasn't a shove with rage, it was worse. A push delivered with the calm of entitlement. My chair tipped slightly. My hand reached instinctively for the table's edge, but the plate slid, clattering onto the runner. The room froze. A jar rolled from the open gift box at my feet. One of my homemade strawberry jams? It spun, the lid rattling, then disappeared beneath the table. No one moved, not even Joran. The sound of glass rolling against hardwood echoed louder than any apology could. Darlie's smile remained untouched. "Accidents happen," she said softly, as if narrating a commercial. Hallie stared at me, eyes wide, fork suspended midair. Kyron reached for his glass but didn't drink. My son's face was pale, his mouth working around words that never came. Raphael. Darlie's father looked alarmed, but he said nothing. He adjusted his cufflinks, eyes darting toward the untouched roast. I straightened slowly, every movement measured. "Excuse me," I whispered. My voice trembled once, then steadied. "I'll freshen up." No one objected. No one offered a hand. I turned toward the hallway, careful not to step on the glint of jam near the baseboard. As I reached the doorway, I heard Darlie's voice again, hushed but sharp. "Don't make it a scene," she said to Joran. "She'll get over it." Raphael's gaze followed me. He'd heard it too, in the guest bathroom. I flicked on the light. The mirror showed a woman composed but faintly cracked around the eyes. My lipstick still perfect. My spirit, less so. I dabbed the corner of my mouth and straightened the small brooch shaped like a dove, one I'd worn every Christmas since Joran was a boy. "They forgot," I murmured to my reflection. "I built this family one meal at a time." A soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, Raphael stood there, his expression solemn. "Miss Monroe," he said quietly, "you deserve better than what you just got." For a moment, I saw the gentleness in his eyes, an apology he couldn't give in front of his daughter. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small business card. I'm part owner of a trust firm," he explained. "If you ever need advice, personal, legal, or otherwise." I accepted it carefully, folding it into my palm like a fragile promise. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, then returned to the table. I waited a few seconds before walking down the hall, past the framed family portraits I wasn't in. The living room glowed in soft gold, laughter faint and hollow from the dining room. On the floor near the foyer, a smear of red jam caught the fairy lights, bright as blood, quiet as proof. I slipped my coat over my shoulders and opened the door. The December air was cool, scented faintly with cedar and smoke. My car keys jingled softly, steadying my hand. No one followed me out. The driveway was lined with perfect luminaries, each candle flickering in its paper bag. I watched them tremble in the breeze, then whispered to myself, "If silence is their comfort, I'll turn it into evidence." The rain started before dawn. It tapped against the kitchen window like a metronome counting silence. I sat at the table in my robe, the house dim except for the glow of a single lamp. The coffee pot was still warm from the night before, its last cup gone cold. My phone sat next to it, screen dark, no missed calls, no messages from Joranne. The events from last night replayed like a muted film. Darlie's hand on my shoulder, the jam rolling across the floor, the faces that froze in politeness. The sting wasn't sharp anymore. It had dulled into something heavier, like a stone I couldn't set down. Outside, the rain made the pines bend. I thought of all the Christmas mornings I'd spent waking early to cook breakfast for that family, to make sure no one ever felt forgotten. Now, my table felt too large for one person. When the doorbell rang, it startled me. No one visits early on Christmas Day. I opened the front door to find a single box wrapped in gold paper, rain spots darkening the corners. The tag read, "For Arliss." I carried it inside, setting it gently on the table. My name was written in Darlie's looping script. For a moment, I allowed myself to think it might be an apology, a gesture of grace. I tore the paper carefully, and my breath caught. Inside lay the quilt I'd made for her last Christmas, stitched by hand with family initials sewn along the border. It still smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon. A small note sat on top. Didn't match our home palette. Thought you could use it more. I folded the quilt slowly, pressing my fingers over each stitch. Each thread had a memory. Joranne's Little League jersey, one of Hallie's baby blankets, a scrap from my old Sunday dress. The message beneath the politeness was clear. You don't belong in our colors anymore. I placed it over the arm of the couch and let the room fall still again. Hurt gave way to something steadier, anger's quieter cousin, resolve. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was Maura, an old friend and lawyer I'd worked with during community charity events. "Arliss, I heard you weren't at the breakfast this morning," she said gently. "I wasn't invited." I answered, "And that's all right." There was a pause, the kind that means someone's deciding whether to dig deeper. "You mentioned Raphael last week," she continued. "Italian accent. Gray hair? Yes? I think I know who he is. If he gave you his card, keep it somewhere safe. He's not just a businessman, he's connected to several private trusts." Her tone made me sit up straighter. "You're saying he might help me?" "I'm saying he could be a bridge, but tread carefully. Arliss, bridges go both ways." When we hung up, I sat still for a long time, her words settling beside my own reflection in the window. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its scent, clean, heavy, and waiting. My phone chimed again. A new message, this time from Kyron. It was a screenshot. I opened it slowly. "Darlie, Mom-in-law couldn't even sit straight without drama. Someone else laughing emojis. Kyron, this isn't funny. My throat tightened. Not from shame, but recognition. The cruelty wasn't new, it just had a new audience. Yet within the pain was a flicker of something unexpected. Empathy from the boy who'd watched everything. I replied with just 3 words. Thank you. Kyron. A few hours later, an email arrived from Raphael. No subject line. The attachment was a single document labeled Trust Management Framework, Client Sample, inside. The text was minimal, almost blank except for one phrase near the bottom, authorized signature. It wasn't a message of pity. It was an invitation. I stared at that empty line longer than I should have. It looked like possibility disguised as paperwork. I saved the file quietly, then glanced toward the folded quilt on my couch. The colors looked richer now in the afternoon light, unapologetic against my neutral walls. My phone buzzed again, a short audio file from Kyron. The subject, you should hear this. Darlie's voice filled the room, recorded in the echo of a living room conversation. She'll get over it, she was saying. About time she realized who runs this house. Laughter followed. I finally showed the old woman her place. I didn't feel rage. Not anymore. It was like someone had finally lifted the fog and left clarity in its place. For the first time, I whispered. I wasn't angry. I was ready. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a new folder. On the tab, I wrote in neat, steady letters. December 25th. Evidence. Inside. I placed 3 things. The printed email from Raphael, the business card he'd given me, and the USB drive with Kyron's audio file. I slid the folder beneath my desk lamp, the light catching the manila surface until it seemed to glow. Merry Christmas to me, I said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. They taught me the value of evidence, and I'm a quick learner. The house was silent except for the soft hiss of the shower fading down the hall. I stood at the sink, letting warm water run over my hands until the skin flushed pink. The ritual had always been the same after a loss or a turning point. Wash, breathe, begin again. Drops slid from my fingertips into the porcelain basin, carrying the remnants of the day before with them. When I turned off the tap, the silence grew steady. On my desk, I laid out 3 items with deliberate care. The stained program draft with the red slash through, "Thank you, Mom." My place card labeled Mrs. Guest, and a flash drive labeled Chiron Clip 25. Each piece sat like a witness that didn't need prompting. For a long moment, I simply looked at them. They were proof. Yes, but they were also lines in the sand. This was where the noise stopped, where my voice would live in ink and date stamps, not in raised tones or arguments. I opened a new binder and slipped a clean cover sheet inside. December 25th, evidence. I began sectioning it with labeled dividers: paper, audio, witness, household. Under each tab, I logged every detail: where I'd found the evidence, when, who was present, and how it was preserved. It wasn't vengeance that guided my hand, but habit. Years of running church records and charity drives had trained me to document before speaking. Paper didn't shout. It endured. When I finished the index, I paused and wrote at the top margin, "Chain of custody begins." The phrase steadied me. I sat back in the leather chair and stared at the soft reflection in my window. "In our family," I murmured, "the loudest person wins the minute, the careful person wins the month." That lesson had taken me 68 years to say out loud. I reached for a yellow, sticky note and wrote the rule that had saved my dignity. Answer with order. not volume. I stuck it to the corner of my monitor like a compass. Then, one by one, I began drafting the instructions. 3 emails, 3 attachments. The first went to Maura. Subject, revocation of discretionary access. Inside, I requested the removal of Duran's name from every financial account connected to my small LLC. No explanation, no anger, just the directive and an attached list of account numbers. The second attachment contained a record of my personal contributions over the years. Tuition payments, property taxes, medical bills I'd covered quietly. Benefactor directive, I titled it. The third outlined successor provisions, ensuring that Halash and Kyron's educational funds remained untouched by any marital disputes. The document ended with one sentence typed slowly and precisely. I want relief, not revenge. Draft accordingly. By the time I clicked send, the clock read 11:48 p.m. My inbox chimed within minutes. Maura's reply arrived with a secure signing link. Once you execute, her message said, the revisions will go live on the next business day. I'll monitor compliance. I scrolled to the bottom of the agreement and signed my name with a steady hand. Arlise M. Monroe. The confirmation timestamp glowed. 11:59 p.m. December 25th, 2025. The system returned an automatic reply. Effective 08 a.m. CST, December 26. I exhaled slowly, as if I just crossed a narrow bridge in the dark. 2 more emails appeared, one from my bank's CFO, acknowledging the pending changes, and another from compliance services noting that an EDD review would initiate at sunrise. All of it impersonal, procedural, exactly as I wanted. The paper would speak without my voice. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and set 2 alarm reminders on my phone. 6:30 am. Checkpoint, 7:55 am. Pre-activation. Before heading to bed, I texted the grandchildren, Grandma's up early tomorrow. I'm okay. Sleep well. There was no need to explain further. Children deserve calm, not confusion. When dawn arrived, pale light spilling across my office floor, I was already awake. My inbox blinked to life. Execution scheduled. Trust platform. Arliss M. Monroe. A second message followed. Temporary holds applied during activation review. I printed both emails and filed them behind divider 5. Procedures. The pages slid neatly into place. Their weight, both literal and emotional. Systems were now in motion. Quiet. Invisible, irreversible. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Birds picked at the lawn, oblivious to the small revolution unfolding in a modest house at the edge of the woodlands. I closed the binder, its metal rings clicking shut with finality. Sliding it into the fireproof safe, I turned the key once and listened to the lock catch. In the window's reflection, I saw a woman who still carried her own name. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes clear. She wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. She was waiting for the paperwork to do what people could not. A boundary means nothing until it meets a consequence. At exactly 8:01 am, the vibration on my phone began. 1 buzz, then another, then 5 in a row. I glanced at the notifications. Account access suspended, review pending. The message was identical across each linked account. Beneath it, another alert, discretionary access revoked. The next notification wasn't from the bank. It was Duran, then Darley, then Duran again. Their names lit up, disappeared, and returned like a rhythm I didn't care to dance to anymore. I didn't answer. I just sat there at my desk, watching the phone tremble across the wood surface. It reminded me of the way the table had shaken when she pushed me 2 nights ago. Same energy, different cause. This time, the movement came from my stillness. I took a slow sip of tea and let the warmth spread through my hands. The world was finally reacting to my silence. By 8:10, Avery, the CFO, being called. His voice was crisp, efficient, every word weighed. "Good morning, Miss Monroe. Just confirming transfer authorization. As of this morning, all communications and signatory permissions route directly to you." "Understood," I said. "Would you like me to notify your son?" "No," I replied, my tone level. "The system already did." He hesitated, as though waiting for a trace of bitterness. When none came, he exhaled lightly. "Everything's in compliance. Congratulations on your diligence. All right." When the call ended, I allowed myself one small smile. The email confirmation landed seconds later. Subject line simple and perfect. Effective now. For the first time in months, the numbers in those accounts felt like more than currency. They were boundaries turned into proof. The phone rang again. Joran this time. Then Darlie. Then Joran. Again. I turned it face down and poured another cup of tea. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the room in quiet gold. "They would call it drama," I murmured. "I called it data." At 9:42, another number appeared. Shonda Ruiz, HOA Management. I picked up immediately. "Mrs. Monroe," she said briskly, "I'm following up on your inquiry from last week. We've reviewed access logs for Christmas Eve." "Yes?" "There was a late-night entry at 12:07 m. under your old gate code. The security camera confirms a woman resembling your daughter-in-law entering and leaving roughly 5 minutes later." I didn't speak. "For liability purposes, we've flagged it as unauthorized use. You'll receive an incident report today for signature." "Thank you. Ms. Ruiz," I said, "please send the footage to my attorney as well." "Of course." The call ended. I sat very still. It was no longer a family squabble. It was trespass, logged and time-stamped. The system had shifted from emotional to administrative, and in doing so, it had taken my side without knowing it. By noon, Maura called. "It's starting," she said. "The bank requested an in-person clarification of joint asset ownership. I've scheduled mediation for tomorrow morning. They'll come thinking it's routine." "And it isn't?" "Oh, it's routine, all right," she said. "Just not for them." I felt something small and sharp in my chest, satisfaction without malice. "Thank you, Maura." "I'll be there." "Bring nothing but your ID and your binder," she advised. "Let the paper talk." Later that afternoon, I logged into my email. Darlie hadn't written, but her social media account was restless. A new post shimmered for exactly 10 minutes before vanishing. People forget who made them. Within minutes, it disappeared. Panic leaves fingerprints when pride tries to erase it. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. The world outside hummed with ordinary life, neighbors walking dogs, children on scooters, sprinklers clicking in rhythm. Everything felt normal again, almost peaceful. I printed each new notice, each confirmation, each time-stamped message, and slipped them into the binder under Divider 6, Consequences. The final page was blank. I took a pen and wrote across the top, "Silence isn't weakness. It's when the world has to fill in your blanks." I closed the binder and placed it beside the safe, not inside. It was ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow. They'd walk into a bank thinking it was a meeting. I'd walk in knowing it was judgment. I arrived 15 minutes early, the kind of early that doesn't look anxious, just prepared. The bank's conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and filtered air. I chose the chair closest to the window, the one that caught a line of morning light. The empty seat across from me reflected in the table's gloss, its leather smooth and waiting. I remembered another chair, a dining one, with my name card that read, "Mrs. Guest." I folded my hands and waited. At 9:07, the receptionist asked if I wanted coffee. I smiled. No, thank you. I prefer to keep my hands free. The door opened at 9:15. Duran walked in first, his face already tight. Darlie followed, voice clipped. Sorry, the traffic on Research Forest? Mora nodded politely. I said nothing. The bank officer slid a clipboard toward them. Please sign in before we begin. Darlie's eyes skimmed the page and froze. Her pen hovered. The header read, Trust Owner Authorization, Arliss Monroe. My signature was already printed at the bottom. She blinked hard, then glanced at Duran. He turned to me. Mom, what's this? Just what it says. I replied softly, Authorization. For a moment, no one breathed. Paper had done what shouting never could. Darlie broke the silence first. You went behind our backs. I looked at her calmly. You wanted transparency. Now everything's transparent. The sunlight hit the glass wall, making the room almost too bright. Darlie's reflection shimmered across it, blurred, stretched thin. She looked smaller in glass than she did in life. Mora cleared her throat. Let's review the terms for clarity. Her tone was polite, surgical. She opened the folder with a quiet click of the clasp. Mrs. Monroe's trust documents were reactivated on December 26th. Ownership now routes directly to her. Previous discretionary access has been suspended. Darlie's smile faltered. Suspended? You can't just... Mora slid a highlighted line across the table. Actually, you can. Clause 12 covers cases of misconduct or coercion. Duran leaned forward. Mom, this isn't fair. We were managing things for you. I met his eyes. Were you? I didn't see much management, just withdrawal. Darlie's voice cracked. You're punishing us. I shook my head. No, I'm simply correcting an imbalance. Raphael, seated quietly near the door, stood. She deserves her seat, he said. His accent gave the words gravity. I was there when you pushed her. This restores balance. He took the pen, signed as witness, and sat again. The room chilled. Darlie's fingers trembled on her phone. The bank officer's computer chimed once, twice. Everyone turned. Ma'am, he said to me, a security notice just populated. A pending withdrawal from this account has been frozen for review. Darlie's head snapped up. That's my... Technically, he interrupted gently, it's Mrs. Monroe's pending audit. No one moved. The hum of the HVAC filled the silence. Mora gathered her papers. We're finished here, she said quietly. I stood, smoothing the front of my jacket. Thank you for your time. As I reached the door, I paused just long enough to say, the seat she took was temporary. The foundation was always mine. Outside, the Texas air felt crisp, almost kind. I didn't look back. By the time the sun rose 2 days after the meeting, the air in the woodlands felt different. When I stepped out to collect the paper, 2 of my neighbors, people who'd avoided eye contact for weeks, paused mid-walk to wave. One even offered a quiet, Merry Christmas, Miss Monroe. That small courtesy meant more than any grand apology. By afternoon, I found someone had straightened the fallen wreath on my fence, its red ribbon dusted clean. Dignity doesn't arrive with a parade. It comes back like morning light, slow, almost shy, but certain. At 10, Mora called to confirm the bank's audit had officially begun. Everything's moving on schedule, she said. No calls from them yet? Plenty, I answered. I've learned not every ring deserves an answer. We both smiled into the silence that followed. By noon, the neighborhood rumor mill had turned again, this time without my help. I didn't post, didn't comment, didn't correct. The story corrected itself. That afternoon, news reached me through a quiet channel. Darlie's PR firm had placed her on suspension. Apparently, her holiday family live updates, the same ones she'd used to project perfection, were now evidence in an internal review. Clips had surfaced showing the table scene, her hand on my shoulder. My stumble, the collective freeze. Someone in her own department had filed the complaint. She'd gone viral for the wrong reason. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd built a career selling image, and now image was what undid her. Justice doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it just logs in. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I pulled on gloves and spent the afternoon trimming frostbitten basil in my garden. The act of cutting away what no longer grows felt honest. My phone buzzed. Calls, texts, none from her. I left them unanswered, pruning my inbox the way I did the plants. Quiet, deliberate, final. I thought, I don't need to explain anymore. The evidence already has my voice. A day later, a thick envelope arrived from the HOA office. Inside was an official notice. Security footage confirmed unauthorized entry on December 25th, 12:47 Mem. Darlie's figure was clear, stepping through my gate with a code she no longer had the right to use. The timestamp glowed like a witness. No words from me were necessary. The system spoke fluently in documentation. Later that evening, Maura called again. "You've done everything by the book," she said. "Now let the paper do the rest." Her tone was professional but warm, like a doctor assuring a patient that healing has begun, even if the stitches still pull. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe without bracing for the next blow. That night, another email appeared from Maura. This one labeled Draft, Conditional Reconciliation Terms. Inside were calm sentences, each more precise than any I could have written in anger. If future contact is requested, it shall be preceded by a written apology and documented completion of family therapy. There was no vengeance in it, just architecture, boundaries written in ink, justice with a heartbeat. I read it twice, then saved it under a new folder, Future Optional. At dusk, I lit a single candle on the kitchen counter. The flame reflected off the window, catching my reflection. I looked older than I remembered, but steadier, too. "Justice doesn't need an audience," I whispered. The candle flickered once and steadied, the light quiet but unwavering. Outside, wind brushed through the trees, scattering the last dry leaves across the yard. They rustled softly against the fence, the sound of a story ending, without applause, without noise, just truth settling into place. Light can be quiet, too. The first knock came soft, almost shy, against the winter, still air. I thought it was the wind brushing a branch against the porch rail, but when I looked through the glass, Darlie stood there, pale, eyes red, her coat unbuttoned despite the chill. The Christmas wreath still hung half-crooked on my door. It trembled in the breeze as if deciding whether to stay or fall. I almost didn't open the door. But silence had already said enough these past few days, and maybe it was time for words, even if they came from the wrong mouth. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and nodded toward the kitchen table, the same one I had eaten Christmas dinner at alone the night after she pushed me away. She sat, fingers twisting a tissue. I poured coffee out of habit, but neither of us touched it. "Arliss," she began, I just want to put this behind us. Can we just forget everything that happened? All of it?" Her tone was fragile, but her eyes were measuring, testing. It wasn't guilt that drove her here. It was fear. Fear of exposure, of consequence, of the echo her own choices had made. "You want to forget," I said quietly. "I can't. I can forgive, but forgetting would mean it never mattered. The cup between us steamed and then cooled untouched. She shifted in her seat, her voice sharpening. You've made this bigger than it needed to be. Lawyers, audits, my job's at risk. Arliss. You made it that big when you pushed me in front of our family, I said. And the rest when you lied. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The house was so still that even the clock tick sounded intrusive. I could see her walls cracking. Pride first, then deflection, then finally something that looked like exhaustion. Her voice broke. My father's company fell apart this year. We're drowning. I was scared. I thought if I controlled the money, if I looked strong, maybe we could fix it. Her confession wasn't for forgiveness. It was survival instinct. But I still saw the human inside the mistake. She wasn't born cruel, just desperate and foolish. I didn't hate you, she whispered. I just didn't want to be small again. I let the silence stretch until it was steady enough to stand on. Then I said, being small isn't the worst thing. Staying dishonest is... A shadow moved outside the window, one of the HOA neighbors walking her dog. She glanced toward us and looked away quickly. The neighborhood always sees more than it says. Darlie wiped her eyes, her mascara streaking down like ink on confession paper. I turned, took a folder from the counter, and laid it between us. This, I said, sliding a single page forward, is a statement. Just the truth of what happened that night. Sign it for the record, and then we can both move forward. Her hand trembled. You're recording me. No, I don't need to. I already have enough. But the truth deserves your signature. She looked down at the paper. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Then she picked up the pen. Her hand hovered, then pressed down hard, forming her name. She hesitated. I murmured, almost to myself, then signed. Sometimes healing needs ink. When she was done, I folded the page, placed it neatly in a new section of my binder, and stood. Darlie rose too, shoulders slumped, her voice a whisper. I'm sorry. I know, I said. And I hope one day you'll say it to yourself, not to me. She walked to the door without another word. The wreath brushed her sleeve as she passed. When the door closed, the air seemed lighter. I stood by the window, watching her cross the driveway, her figure shrinking between the bare oak trees. Through the frosted glass, she looked like a ghost of a mistake already fading. It's done, I whispered. The wind chime outside caught the breeze and sang a single, trembling note. I didn't win. I survived with my name intact. And that was enough. At exactly 11:30, my phone chimed with Avery's email. The subject line was clean, no exclamation marks. Audit conclusions finalized, noon session mandatory. I put the car in gear, palms steady against the wheel. The winter sun flared off the windshield as I drove toward the Monroe Builders headquarters, the same building where my husband and I once hung our first sign. There was no anger left in me, only readiness. The clock in the boardroom would tick soon enough, steady as a judge's gavel. Time always tells the truth. It just waits for the room to be quiet first. When I stepped into the lobby, the glass doors whispered open. My reflection slid across the company awards mounted along the wall, plaques I'd earned, the years when we were still one family with one goal. The receptionist smiled cautiously. I returned it. Glass, I thought, is honest when people aren't. Inside the boardroom, the air felt heavier. Maura sat near the projector, laptop open. Avery adjusted his tie. The two independent directors whispered near the window. Darlie and Joanne arrived 5 minutes late. Darlie wore black again, her armor of control. but her hands trembled when she signed the attendance sheet. Then the screen came alive. Avery's voice was measured as he presented the first slide. "These are the findings from our internal audit," he said. The words landed like stones. Rows of red highlighted cells filled the display. Late-night transfers, vendor payments traced to Darley's PR shell firm, and personal card charges logged under company accounts. Each entry carried a timestamp, a receipt, and her initials? Nobody moved. Numbers don't apologize. They testify. Darley tried to speak. There's context for that. But Avery continued without flinching. The documentation chain is verified by 2 independent auditors. Every transaction after December 23rd is under your login credentials. Joran shifted in his seat, his tie crooked. "Maybe this can wait. We're all still family." Maura cut in smoothly. "This board operates under legal compliance, not sentiment. The agenda proceeds." I stayed silent. That was my role, to let the paper speak. When Darley reached for a folder, Maura slid one toward her instead. It bore a blue ink stamp, superseded. "That's the proxy you intended to use," Maura said evenly. "The trust amendment filed December 26th voided it. Current voting rights rest with Ms. Monroe and the 2 independent directors." Avery nodded. "We'll proceed to vote on corrective actions." The boardroom fell into a silence so sharp you could hear the hum of the projector. Maura read the motions. Freeze disputed disbursements. Terminate Darley's PR contract. Restrict Joran's access pending review. All in favor? 3 hands rose, including mine. The vote carried. Darley's shoulders sagged, but I felt no joy in it, only release. The process had spoken and the rules had held. Then Raphael, quiet until now, stood up. His voice was steady, almost pastoral. "For the record," he said, "I witnessed the Christmas incident. Ms. R. Monroe was not at fault. I submit the statement to the minutes." The room froze again, but this time with respect. Strength can be silent. I thought. Today, it's also seen. The meeting adjourned. Papers rustled. Chairs slid back. As I stepped into the hallway, Joran caught up, eyes heavy. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I met his gaze and nodded once. "Then learn from it," I said. There was no anger left to spend. Back in Avery's office, the light through the blinds striped across my binder like a quiet metal. I signed the implementation orders with deliberate care. Initials clean and firm, outside. The parking lot shimmered with heat, though the day was cold. I breathed evenly. The weight in my chest, no longer sharp but solid. Earned truth. Once written, doesn't hurry. But it doesn't leave. The winter dusk had already settled when I parked outside Magnolia Oaks Middle School. The sodium lights hummed overhead, washing the pavement in a pale blue glow. I sat for a moment, folding and unfolding the playbill in my hands. My name wasn't printed anywhere in it, of course, but tonight wasn't about me. It was about showing up, quietly, and letting presence speak where words no longer could. I chose a seat mid-row, aisle side, where I could see the stage clearly. A few parents glanced my way, whispers rippling like wind through reeds. They knew what had happened. Everyone in the Woodlands knew, in their own version of it. The board vote had traveled faster than the facts. But here, in this auditorium filled with the rustle of paper programs and winter coats, respect was beginning to return. One mother gave a small nod. Another murmured a simple, "Good to see you, Mrs. Monroe." It was more than I expected. Reputation travels faster than truth, but tonight, they'd finally walked in together. Then came the soft shuffle of sneakers and the sound of a young teacher's voice. I looked up, and saw it. The front row, center aisle, had a printed sign taped to the seat. Reserved for Grandma Arliss, my full name, spelled correctly. Kyron stood beside it, shoulders back, his sister Hallie grinning wide. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. That single sheet of paper glowed under the house lights, and I thought of the Christmas card that had once called me Mrs. Guest. This was its quiet undoing. A printed name can be a promise you can sit in. When the curtain rose, I didn't blink. Haleg stepped forward for her short solo, her voice steady and pure. Kieran's drum cue followed a beat later, confident, sure of timing. My chest tightened, but I held the tears. The room didn't need to see grief anymore. It needed to see grace. Around me. Applause filled the air, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt warmth not forced by polite smiles, but offered freely. After the show, the lobby was a swirl of laughter and photo flashes. I kept to the side, clutching the playbill. Joran appeared from the crowd, looking older, the shine of certainty gone from his eyes. Darlie trailed behind him, silent, her coat collar high. For a second, he hesitated, then stepped closer. Outside, under the string lights, I handed him an envelope, cream, embossed with my initials. "This," I said evenly, "is the only way forward." Inside were 3 pages, a promise letter. Limited Sunday dinners with the children at my home. Mandatory parenting class certificates for both him and Darlie. A reimbursement plan for the misused funds. And one final clause, no discussion of family matters at work. Each condition was typed, initialed, and dated. Boundaries, not bitterness. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hand shook as he took the envelope. "You're really making me sign this?" I met his eyes. Love without terms isn't love. Joran, it's neglect. Back home, I boiled water for tea and texted Maura a picture of the signed receipt. She replied with a single word, "Filed." The kettle whistled softly, steady as breath. I slid the letter copy into my binder, its spine now thick with truth. Each divider labeled in my handwriting. That binder had become my armor, not to attack, but to hold steady. The screen of my phone lit up, FaceTime from Hallie and Kieran. "Grandma!" Hallie shouted. "Oh, did you see your seat?" I smiled. "I did, sweetheart. It was perfect." Kieran grinned, tapping the camera too close to his face. "We told them to spell it right this time." After the call ended, the house went quiet again. I rinsed my teacup and set it by the sink. The moonlight touched the chrome like a thin silver coin. Peace. Paid in full. I opened the drawer and placed the folded playbill beside the trust documents. 2 kinds of proof living side by side. Some nights end in applause, others in paperwork. Mine ended in both. The morning sun slipped through the blinds, thin and disciplined, like light that understood boundaries. I sat at my oak desk, pen poised over the final page of my family trust ledger. Every column balanced, every signature accounted for. The decimals lined up like soldiers, neat and unapologetic. For the first time in years, there were no missing numbers, no hidden withdrawals, no questions, just clean order. For years, they called me controlling. Now, they call me accurate. Maura's call came just as I was finishing my notes. "Arliss," she said, her tone lighter than it had been in months. "The restitution payments have begun. The final audit's clear. You've done it." I smiled, tracing the edge of a manila folder. "Not done, just balanced." "Justice is balanced," she replied. "Oh, not victory." I hung up and looked at the ledger again. So quiet, yet so loud in its truth. Numbers had never comforted me this much before, but numbers don't lie, and paper doesn't forget. Later that afternoon, the community hall buzzed with voices and the smell of coffee and lemon bars. A banner hung above the small stage, the Chair Legacy Award in memory of Thomas Monroe. My husband's name gleamed on the plaque below it, engraved in bronze. The scholarship fund, born from restitution, not resentment, would support students who studied architecture and community design. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same money that once tried to erase me now carried our family name forward. Forgiveness became easier when I realized I could redirect what was taken. When they handed me the microphone, I didn't speak long. "My husband built homes," I said, "not just walls and windows, but spaces where people could feel safe. I hope this fund builds the same." The audience applauded politely, but I didn't need noise. The plaque was sound enough. That evening, as I sat at home with a cup of tea cooling beside me, my phone buzzed. Joran's name glowed on the screen. For a second, I considered letting it ring out, but I answered. "Mom," he said quietly, "I saw the scholarship online. You did good." I didn't rush to fill the silence that followed. "Thank you," I said simply. "Maybe," he added, voice breaking slightly. "Maybe we can bring the kids next week." "Let's see," I said, "one Sunday at a time." Sometimes healing comes disguised as a voicemail. An hour later, I found a small envelope tucked under my front door. Eli's handwriting covered the front. "For Grandma." Inside was a card drawn with crooked lines and crayons, me standing beside a tall house, smoke curling from the chimney. Underneath, he'd written, "When I grow up, I want to build houses like you." My throat caught on a soft laugh. The handwriting wobbled, but the foundation was there. That night, I lit the fireplace and pulled out one of Thomas's old notebooks. His writing, firm, tidy, always in pencil, read, "Protect the ones who learn." I closed the cover gently, the warmth of the fire reflecting in the brass lamp beside me. I used to think protecting meant holding on. Turns out, it meant letting go wisely. I returned to the desk and opened the ledger one final time. On the last line, beneath all the transactions and signatures, I wrote, "Paid in full, emotionally and legally." Then I capped the pen, turned off the lamp, and let the room fall into its natural quiet. Every family has its debts. Some are finally settled in light. It was December 24th again. The same house, the same table, but the air was different. The light in the dining room was softer, honeyed by the new pendant lamp I'd chosen myself. The tablecloth was simple white cotton, the plates mismatched from years of dinners. The chair, where I once stood trembling a year ago, was back in its rightful place. I touched its backrest gently, a private act of reclaiming. I thought forgiveness would change them. It changed the air instead. The house no longer felt tense. It breathed again. Eli's laughter echoed from the hallway, followed by Morgan's high-pitched, "Grandma, don't peek yet." I smiled and settled at the table, letting the scent of cinnamon and clove fill the room. Darlie and Joran were in the kitchen, quieter than I remembered, their voices lowered but civil. Maura, my lawyer-turned-friend, was checking the pies by the oven. This was peace, not loud, not absolute, but present. The meal began with the kids' idea, a toast. They stood side by side, glasses of sparkling cider in hand. "To Grandma," Eli said. His cheeks flushed. Morgan added, "For teaching us how to stand tall, quietly." The adults clinked glasses. The sound was light and full, no longer sharp like it had been a year before. You can't teach kindness, I thought. You live it until others notice. When I set my glass down, I noticed a small envelope beside my plate. Cream paper, sealed with a wax stamp. It was from Darlie. I opened it, expecting another layer of drama, but instead found a printed note and a check, a donation to the scholarship fund bearing my late husband's name. No words, no apology, no flourish, just action. I nodded slightly toward her, and she gave a restrained nod back. No apology can undo a year, I thought. But a gesture can begin the next one, later. As dishes clinked and laughter spread, Joran came to me by the window. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know now about everything. I should have stood up sooner." Or his voice wasn't heavy with guilt anymore, just awareness. I didn't touch his hand, but I looked at him long enough for the silence to mean something. "We both learned the hard way," I said. "That silence has a cost." He nodded, eyes glistening. The old defenses were gone. In their place, a fragile honesty stood. At the end of the table, one chair remained intentionally empty. On it, I had placed Thomas's folded sweater, the one he always wore to carve the roast. A single candle flickered beside it. Some absences still glow. It wasn't grief anymore. It was gratitude that the space remained honored, not erased. Maura raised her glass for a short toast. "To Arliss," she said, "who reminded us all that grace can have paperwork." The table erupted in laughter. Then she added, more gently, "and for turning a painful year into something that lifts others. The mentorship program for widows. Thomas would have been proud." Legacy isn't what you leave. I thought, it's what you keep teaching. Dinner ended quietly. The neighbors stopped by to drop off cookies. Morgan showed them the scholarship photo framed by the fireplace. Darlie helped clear dishes without being asked. I didn't read too much into it. Healing wasn't an ending. It was a maintenance plan, like tending a house through every season. When everyone left, the house grew still again. I stepped onto the porch, wrapping my shawl around my shoulders. The air was crisp, and to my surprise, tiny flakes of snow drifted down, the rare kind that melts before it hits Texas ground. Through the window, I could see the dining table glowing under warm light. My chair was still pulled out slightly. Waiting, I whispered into the cold night. This time, I kept my seat. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the end of defending your right to sit at your own table. Inside, the candle beside Thomas's sweater burned steady. I closed the door softly and let the house exhale. Looking back now, I realized that strength isn't always about standing up in front of others. Sometimes, it's about sitting down and refusing to be moved from your own truth. I learned that boundaries are not walls, they're lessons written in love. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means choosing peace so it can't own you anymore. If my story taught you anything, I hope it's this. You can rebuild your dignity quietly, with grace and with proof. You don't have to shout to be heard. Just keep your records, keep your heart steady, and let time reveal what's right. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment when staying calm was your greatest victory? I'd love to hear what this story meant to you. Type 1 in the comments if it touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind us that strength and kindness can live in the same heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who might need a little light today.